Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. Yeah, anyway, the pain. Life on Earth. Can't move. So, you're stuck in this fun park of communicating, interacting with humans. Ooh. So, in that process, I've been watching these and responding to a conversation between somebody called Robinson and Earhart, and some guy called Michael Granzanio. Granzanio. Yeah, it's not that hard. Anyway, neuroscientist. He's supposed to be. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, and it's just about consciousness and what it is to be alive and what does it mean and does it have any value and blah 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 blah, and it's all just kind of mush. So it's been a little tedious. It's starting to get interesting by the third hour of my video. So there's 3 videos, 3 parts so far, and there are probably going to be 3 more. So it'll be a lot of crap to watch if you like to just watch crap. Obviously, I think I make insightful commentary, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, it's always interesting when somebody starts talking about what it is to be alive, and you're always kind of curious, like, how did they figure that part out, or why did they say that, or how do they dismiss this, and how do they, how do they say anything optimistic? Because, frankly, there's nothing, there's nothing looks very good. Even all the little stuff that's broken in the human systems, all the unsustainable nonsense, none of it looks like it's going to have a very happy ending. But anyway, on top of the fact that it's had a very tragic and horrible to get to this point, all of the wars and the horrors and the plagues, all the terrible shit that has happened to people. Very high price paid, again, for what? A really ugly ballet. So anyway, you can almost, it's like financing the Special Olympics. A lot of money, a lot of bullshit, a lot of candy and balloons, but it's not a very good show. Anyway, I guess we'll get to it, and I will, jump through the 3 videos so far, and highlights, lowlifes, who know what will hit. It's all in the cards, so to speak. Alright, leave us continue. Problem where we can actually see the maze and the game and all this stuff, so it's a lot different than for an animal who's just can barely understand that there's such a thing as tomorrow. Anyway, so yes, you've heard me say things like that before. So it makes life different, okay, for us to be intelligent, informed, and in some ways you appreciate not being fooled and being able to understand your life in a better context. But frankly, it doesn't make it any easier because half the knowledge is very negative, at least half. Yeah, a lot more than half, I guess, in terms of just giving you damn good reason not to be very happy about what you're part of. And I could argue there was some point in my life where trees didn't just look like trees anymore, because of the idea of evolution. My brain had sort of made them into bloody, drippy things because it was just a symbol for what the price is for this lush environment. is that that awful lot of death has to take place every single day. Everybody has to eat, right? And everybody else isn't eating their vegetables. So, ooh.
Three things I'm sure that we could get more granular. But I'm interested in that philosophical question, whether it's like or what it's like to be an animal. Then for...
Alright, so they never got to that, frankly. I mean, they still almost haven't after half the interview. So that's a little disappointing. In terms of just recognizing that the only thing that's different between being an animal and being a human is a tiny amount of, awareness difference. That you see a little bit more, and that's it. You can see a week ahead instead of a day ahead or an hour ahead, something like that. It's just not enough of a difference. The crabs would be mating. You're like, all right. So I was telling a little story about going crabbing as a kid, and the crabs would be in the process of making love, and I felt guilty. It's like, well, they shouldn't be eating while they're mating, so okay, it's their own damn fault. So I came up with some rationalizations, but it just seems like, it's like I wouldn't, if crabs smoke cigarettes and they were having a nice beer and a cigarette, I wouldn't want to catch one while he's having a beer and a cigarette and he's nice and comfortable. It's just kind of rude.
And the content, but then there's the magic essence of experience, which you can't touch and you can't quite measure.
So this is how they always paraphrase the argument. Like, you can't possibly have a rational statement about something. You can only have irrational statements. It always has to be magical. So as soon as you say consciousness is more than the parts, just kind of meaning that you can't just look at the parts because there's so many gears turning so many different ways. It's like looking at a complex transmission. And you can't really follow along, but the transmission is producing it. It's just that you're not going to play some idiotic game and say that you truly can understand all of that. So the mechanical system is a little beyond our reach in terms of grokking it or, understanding it. And all we can understand is, yes, it's mechanical, it's not magical. But they just always push everybody into a magical if they're not as insensitive, cruel, sadistic, and lunatic-y as they are. And that's the bullshit. You're not making a religious statement to say our conscious experience is real. It's happening in the universe. It is a mechanical process in our brain. It's ridiculous to say it doesn't happen because I can't describe how the mechanical system is creating the illusion, the projection of experience. It obviously is. But yeah, I can't draw you a picture of that. I can draw you an outline of it, not a picture. And some understandings aren't schematic, so in the sense that the black and white are clearly categorizable. So yes, it's really easy to understand that that's what there is. There's stuff decidedly on sides of fences, and all they want to argue about is the crap right on top of the fence. They never want to argue the obvious, that there is catastrophic torture and there is delightful bliss, and those are really easy to make a statement about. And then there's a ton of stuff that's just wobbling on a line somewhere, and so who the hell cares? Let's not argue that crap. Let's just argue the real existence of these extremes and then try to say, is there any possibility that the stuff on one side can pay for the stuff on the other side? And I'd say if somebody does that honestly, there's no way they're going to say it's worth it. Especially when you're imposing it on somebody else. Damped with a statement about what happened in that experience. Good outcome, bad outcome. I guess I'm saying something similar, that yes, we can basically label the experiences as positive and negative, and let's not pretend they're going to be in some other category that's going to mean something. That's really the only category that matters. Was it fun or was it not fun? And us, in terms of feeling, it's just such bullshit.
So the questions facing us as scientists is, what brains construct that kind of self-model, and why?
All right, the self-model talk. So this is where it's just, to me, jargon and nonsense, that this has something to do with the way our brain manifests consciousness in the sense of some idea of a self-model, which it really isn't. I'm not modeling, you know. I'm sitting here making a video, and my brain kind of knows an agenda. I don't know what it's going to do exactly, all right? I can't have any awareness of the way it manufactures the arguments. It manufactures the arguments. It's doing it right now. And so there's just no point in dissecting all of that and claiming it isn't anything, when clearly it's something, because it's pretty coherent and it's on the subject and it's doing a pretty good frickin' job. So why pretend the brain isn't functioning at a pretty high level?
So what? I mean, sure, people pay attention and it's part of everyday life, but here's what attention does. Attention is a way of using resources in a strategic way. And so without attention, if you have...
So obviously our focus is changing constantly. Your eyes pick up things based on, and I'm saying it's just looking for patterns to match. And it's always looking for the relevant pattern to match. So I could bring this up. I mean, right now there's all this talk about drones. There's drones everywhere, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and as soon as you start talking about it, everybody starts looking for them. And then everybody starts spoofing them. And everybody starts blah, blah, blah. And you end up just building a bunch of, you have a nothing to start with, and you just make a something out of nothing. Because of how you change the focus. But I'm sure that happens to animals too. I'm sure when they get attacked by something, for the next few weeks, they're very aware of that certain kind of attack. A snake or something else. And then that sort of fades, and maybe lions and tigers and bears become more important, And then then a snake happens again. Let's be aware of snakes again. So yeah, we have to pay attention, and clearly our attention is mutable. It can move based on mood and agenda. I'm always looking for exits, exit signs. Yeah, so I'm always looking for exit signs. Exit, there's got to be an exit.
Pulsed. In mammals, it turned into the cortex, but it evolved from the same underlying structure. So this is just a crude discussion of the evolution of brain, but it's not much of a conversation about what changed for humans. And so they always talk as if it's, we have this big cortex and big. And it wasn't the big part. It was the structural part. It was the fact that we became disabled as children. You can see it. We're born disabled. Huge different from any other animal on Earth. No organism is born as useless as a human baby. Some people talk about kangaroos, but it's a different kind of birth. Obviously, going into a pouch it's not really like you've really been born. Okay, so let's not pretend it's exactly the same thing. But it's just true. There's just nothing that, and it takes years for it to figure out how to do stuff. Years, not months or weeks, years, before it can walk on its own feet and survive. So, come on. Clearly, that's the big difference for human babies, is that they're, a chimpanzee is a chimpanzee in about a year. It's a chimpanzee, right? It's pretty much functioning as a chimpanzee. A human doesn't reach any kind of adult functionality for at least, 5 years? And you'd hardly call a 5-year-old anything close to adult functionality. Just part of what it's learned through experience. And some of it is instinctive in the sense that, the snake reaction, some of that. So we have about 2 of those. We have so little built-in functionality, and we just have a bunch of vestigial instincts, if you could call them anything at all. They're barely a glimmer of an instinct and such. I would do one more here and then switch the video. Looking at the environment and being triggered by it. But that's all we're doing, just looking for something to trigger us. So he calls this attention, and I call it triggering, and it doesn't really matter. The fact is we don't have much control over it, so to speak. I mean, you can just have ideas, and the ideas, you didn't invent them. They were a byproduct of mixing your experience, so the whole thing is just you either will or will not be fair, reasonable, intelligence seeking, blah blah blah, knowledge seeking, whatever you want to call that. You either will be a good guy or you'll end up being a shithead, and it won't have much to do with some choice you made. It's just going to have to do with how in certain circumstances you had bad information and your brain calculated poorly. And that's about all you can say. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, back. Yeah, so I was just going to point out on the website, these 3 videos are there, so they are available. I'll try to leave links in the appropriate places, blah blah blah, and such. So at least I can get rid of that down there. You don't need that. Alright, so continuing, this is the second video and such.
Trouble controlling your arm. So the model, these schemas or models are really important in control, and attention is something we have to control.
So again, they say we have a model, and I don't think the model's in one place, so that's kind of a silly idea of our body or something else, or our whole essence. And what we have is muscle memories. We have reflexes, essentially, that have been altered and controlled to create a little bundle of information where the brain can just say do drink, and the motion is already learned. Do fork, knife, cut food, and so we practice things. It becomes a more permanent little hunk of crap, and your brain can just go to that crap when it wants something to happen, blah blah blah. So that's the process. That's why it takes time and it's tedious to learn and all of this kind of stuff, is because you have to practice learning, just like anything else.
And that another creature has...
I don't even think the kids understand the question. I think that's the problem. You're not explaining to them. Alright, so he's talking about all these psychological test bullshit thingies, these terrible experiments they do that really are just bullshit. Just asking people, how happy do you feel, or some kind of stupid crap like that. So they trick little kids. They do some little thing, and does the little kid figure out the trick, and then they draw all kinds of extrapolated conclusions based on the fact that the kids reacted a certain way, when it seems clear to me the kid just didn't understand the question you're asking. So in this case, it was like somebody hides something or in some way in front of the kid, and then you ask the kid, what would a person do if they were looking for it? And obviously the kid's just saying, well, this is over there, I saw them hide it. So instead of saying he would look over here because that's the logical place it should have been, because before somebody hit it. And I'm just saying, it's just bullshit. I call bullshit anyway. This thing being physical in the universe, so we know that cats do all of this stuff because they have to catch mice later. They have to do things. And I think I was talking about like kittens playing and all this stuff, and it's all part of what they have to acquire as skills. And so, that's all it exists for, is life practice. Your dreams are practicing life. It's all got some sort of purpose from some evolutionary history. And yes, for us, a lot of that isn't necessary anymore. But, the pieces are still there. Same thing. You see something unusual. Right now, there's somebody walking they're dogs, and they have a cat that walks with them. Okay. Right, so you see something and you notice something that's unusual, right? So you always see people walking dogs, you never see people walking cats, and you certainly don't see cats walking without a leash like a dog. Okay, so, you know, so the part that's odd and unusual sticks out, your brain gets triggered by it. Now later, because I've seen that, might look for it in some other circumstance where I'm watching something else. I'll see if there's a cat there. You know, my brain will now waste a little bit of time looking for this new thing that it hadn't seen before. The drones. Maybe somebody be walking their drone.
I'll give you an example, and this isn't really, it's consciousness adjacent. It's very closely related to all these different questions, but it isn't maybe the heart of what people think of as consciousness. But it turns out in people, one of the ways that we model or understand attention, especially visual attention, is by means of this weird subthreshold tendency to perceive beams coming out of people's eyes.
All right, so this is his bullshit, right? And, no. No, I don't. I've never thought of people as having beam eyes, so that's just sort of bullshit. You do notice when somebody's staring at something, but, you know, again, does my brain really model it as beams coming out of their eyes? I don't think so. So once it becomes legal for a kid to know, oh, we can just make shit up, they start making shit up. So that's the problem, right? Everybody's raised in bullshit, in this sea of bullshit that the life lovers and the life livers and the make babyers have to live by to be as cruel and horrible as they are. And so every kid is taught how to be a liar, essentially, because, yeah, there's nothing about the truth in any part of the maturation of a child. Nobody tells the kid the truth. You know, that your relationships are going to be a mess, you're going to have your heart broken, you're going to get a disease and die. You know, I mean, just spell it out that this isn't going to be any kind of easy ride. Even if you have good things happen, you'll probably have just as many bad things happen. So, you know, it's just going to be a bumpy ride. And so they once in a while do say that, like some old crotchety crud person will say, well, you better enjoy it now, kid, because it doesn't get any better. You know, some grumpy guy. But it's way too late for a kid to be able to actually learn something from that and say, oh, it's worse than I thought. My parents are bigger liars than I thought.
The model that our visual system constructs. We're born with it. We can't, it's like we don't have a top-down intellectual way of...
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that system. I mean, you know, as a kid, you know, that's part of it. I'm just looking at him, I'm saying, oh, shit, you know, when you're a kid, you're like, oh, that guy might as well be dead. Look at him. He's a fucking mess. You know, I mean, you're young, fit, healthy, you're all these things, and you're seeing what you're going to grow into, and it's like, oh, fuck. You know, why would I want to get a day older? It's all downhill. And you have this expectation that there's no way I'm going to live to be that mess. You know, then you end up doing it, right? But, you know, as a kid, I had no idea that I'd still be here now. Because it was like, oh, that's just unacceptable. I can't even imagine that huge degrade. Just getting wrinkly and old and, ugh. It was just, yuck. Perfectly is coherent to the world we exist in. White should be, all right, different color, okay, than the prime. Yeah, so this is all the crap that just couldn't matter, right? I mean, talking about how your brain manufactures subtle differences in, you know, what you see versus what actually is the process. You could even talk about the fact that your eyes have some missing pixels and they fill in the blanks. There's a couple of little spots where you actually can't see what's there, and your brain just fills it in. You know, it just smears the rest into that area and just makes it go away. as a defect or an absence. It just averages.
Not think that understanding it from the scientific perspective negates the user suffering or joy or whatever, right? So do people...
again, there's no... Dissecting the human does not change the fact that the goddamn human, when it's conscious, is going to have these sensations. So, fuck, there's no dissection that stops that from happening. Right. So, I mean, again, so they're trying to find rationalization, as far as I can tell, in some sort of intellectual evasion speech, you know, to try to say that they can calculate, you know, some way out of the dismal truth that we're part of this horrible carnage system of, you know, cannibalism, and that, you know, it's disgusting. So, you know, and they're just finding rationalizations to say it's all okay somehow. You know, highly convoluted, you know, technical nonsense that doesn't have anything to do with the subject even. Of just you know, muscle ripping pain, and you're just like, what? I couldn't do that for more than 30 seconds. That so I was talking about, you know, leg cramps. I get them, and you know, calf muscles mostly, and you know, they're intense. You know, for 30 seconds you are fucking really a mess in terms of being able to do any functioning, because this intense ripping process is taking place in a sense, and you know, you're stuck after. You know, it obviously does some damage, and you know, you end up with a, you know, sort of a pulled muscle for a couple of days sometimes, because the cramps are that bad. Weird process, frankly. I don't, you know, totally understand why that even exists as a function, but it has to do with lactic acid and circulation and all kinds of different things. So, yeah, I don't know what it is as a statement about my own condition. I mean, I'm generally healthy, okay? I mean, I, you know, you know, but yeah, my fingers get cold. So, you know, my circulation has some iffy bits, and that's a little bothersome.
So all of this is processing information about events on the surface of the...
So you know that somebody they can lose their arm, and they have the ghost pain. So we know the pain isn't because he has... Yeah, so they're basically just turning pain into some sort of, you know, it happens to the body part. But he does get to the point that it's a brain function, but they're trying to make it into a limited brain function. And obviously a lot of our feelings are so nuanced and weird that, you know, it's not just some on-off trigger, it's some sort of dripping of acid. You know, it's a slow process of the brain creating that mood or that condition. So like a depression even, it's like it's created a whole bunch of chemical shit that you have to wait till all that clears, you know, before you're going to feel right again.
Like it, right? That final stage of self-model could be missing. So that's what I think is involved. There's layers on layers of processing, and the raw nociceptive input is processed in very complex ways, and then experience itself is processed in a different way. And
yeah, so he's talking about these, you know, the pain neurons versus the touch neurons versus the blah blah blah, and I don't think there's anything that's just one thing. So yes, your brain takes the information and it can do different things with the same information depending on what your sensitivity is, what your biorhythm has created in terms of your chemistry. You could almost argue that you're more sensitive to pain in certain chemical conditions. You know, change something in the underlying physiology in terms of what hormones are pumping through you, and you'll be more or less sensitive. Moronic cultures are just as valid. They're not really morons. Okay, so when they threw their daughters in the volcano, they weren't morons. If they knock their kids' teeth out because it looks cool, they're not morons. So yeah, I can't remember exactly how he got to that, but yeah, this idea that any human thought is a legitimate thought is really, really stupid, and he was sort of implying that in a way. All right, so we'll jump ahead to number 3. All right, so this is the third video. They get a little bit more now. This is actually starting to talk a little bit about the quality of part, the fact that we do have this real experience of positive and negative experiences, but they don't really even just say that simple sentence. There's just some point where the guy actually concedes that pain is bad, okay, so at least he gets somewhere, but it's such a small where, okay, and he's still sort of ambiguously defining our morality, as they call it, as some innate process of judgment rather than some calculation that actually has to be rational. So I mean, the argument is that, yeah, just like anything else in the universe we can measure values and compare them and, do some thinking in terms of modeling and creating an image of the proportionalities and whatnot, and all of that is turned into just some subjective event rather than the idea that they're really objective calculations, in the sense that we can all show each other our math and say, here, this is how I added it up. These are the numbers I have, and you can see people actually put having a brain tumor that pops your eye out, well, that's only a negative 0.6. Obviously it doesn't get much worse than that. I hope. Gross. And it's bad math. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, see, right there, I'm talking about it. So, it is real. It is real science. The calculating of value is like any other calculation. It's like any other process of formalizing some understanding logically of how it works, and being fair is all you really need to be. And you'll understand that, yes, I can't go to Las Vegas with somebody else's money and lose it. That's not nice. And imposing life isn't a nice thing to do, because the risk that you just sold them shit, you just gave them a shit burger, is way too high and way too likely. Just on the law of averages. The average human will be in some way disabled before they're 50 years old. Statistically. Not a gift. Limbs, and then they can still feel pain in their non-existent arm, clearly indicating the brain is manufacturing or interpreting the data. Yes, so just, but this whole argument of where the pain, it's a waste of time. The body's necessary for keeping the brain alive and creating some sense organs, and the brain has an incentive to keep the body intact and all that kind of stuff, but we know the consciousness is just happening in the brain. To very sophisticated shrimp. So then they were talking about shrimp, and this, they started saying, oh, they don't have a brain, so they can't feel. But that's not all shrimp. So shrimp are kind of a weird, it's almost, I guess they almost have to be put in their own classification. I mean, they're called crustaceans, all this kind of stuff, but in a sense, they have the whole evolution is right there. You have a shrimp that's got almost nothing for brains, and then you have shrimp that have a whole pile of brains. So it's just not fair to say there's worm humans and regular humans. It's just not making a very fair comparison. So the generalization of shrimp doesn't mean much. There's some that are highly evolved, some that aren't so highly evolved, you could argue. They might all be ancient in their function, but some got there and went a lot further evolutionarily than others. Some needed to change, some didn't.
Brain. The secondary neuron synapse.
So a reflex. So, secondary neurons just saying it's... So, yeah, this is all the minutiae that doesn't matter. You have one long neuron that goes from your spinal cord all the way to some part of your body. And then usually in the spinal cord there are connections that take the information and take it to the next step. And so it creates sort of a brain barrier also. You can understand that if you had a cell that was part of your regular body and it also went to your brain, that your brain could be polluted by some chemical or some process that fucked up the nerve. And so it's always good to have this cushioning, these barriers against pollution, so to speak. So your brain becomes kind of an independent system by the fact that it doesn't directly connect to any part of your body directly. It always uses some sort of electrical connection, so it can't be polluted. So there's so much nuance is the point. There's a ton. That's not even what they were saying in that video. I was just pointing out some other biological fact why there's a difference. But the truth is yes, the neurons connect to neurons before they actually start processing the information. They've already transferred the information to some government official, and then he, some delivery person, and then he delivers it to the brain, that kind of thing. The information goes to a place, and then that place sends out delivery people, and the delivery people deliver the message, that kind of thing.
Feel the pain ultimately, but normally you're activating many of them.
So right, so he just said you can activate one of them and feel something, and so that was wrong. I was pointing out how no, you can't. I mean, the neurons are sort of like your eyeball. It needs more than one photon. It can't really see just one. Your brain knows it can't just jump because one neuron says something's happening. It needs more than one to do something, but whatever, blah blah. Small point, who cares? I'm not going to argue it.
Right, those are much more anchored to the nuts and bolts. But you do have this final layer, which is the subjective experience itself.
So this is all their rhetoric, right? They always say this crap, this subjective experience. Well, of course it's subjective. It's my brain creating it. We already know we can't read each other's minds, and I can't feel your pain and all that crap. But to imply subjectivity is to imply irrationality and emotionalism and all kinds of other nonsense. So because you say subjective, it's like saying kinetic energy versus just saying energy or momentum, right? So it's just playing with words, and as if there's some meaningful distinction, and there's not a meaningful distinction. I subjectively add 2 plus 2. My brain does it. But obviously it's what you could understand as an objective calculation about an objective thing external to myself. So our subjective experience is objectively connected to a ton of objective facts. And, let's not pretend that it's all self-created, because it isn't. It's made out of every experience in your life. So I don't think this is I think the pieces that have to be broken are so numerous for you to be true. Okay, so he's talking about people that have certain brain injuries, this and that, and they can't feel this and they can't do, and all of that is so anecdotal. That's almost describable as subjective, in the sense that this isn't really objective science to say what are extremes doing, what are 1 in a million doing. It's not a very sensible way to argue the argument, and it's not even true, in the sense that what he's trying to imply is that somehow you could be in an ideal condition where you can gain full knowledge from having a reward and punishment system, and you don't have a reward and punishment system. So you could argue that there's some point in our life where we're wise enough that we're not going to burn our flesh off, and we're not going to do all these things, so we don't need to have sensations anymore. Or we certainly don't need to have pain, and we don't need to have moods and all of that crap. And I would argue that's probably true. But there's no way you're going to create a chemical that can do that, because all of that stuff is created by so many different elemental circumstances that create it. So one pill isn't going to stop all of your glands from creating their chemistry. What did we do? Yeah, no. And the simple answer is, yeah, we can't do anything to earn spilling that much, to justify, right, spilling that much blood. So again, I've made that point over and over again. We're not worth it. We're not worth it. We're not singing and dancing at any kind of professional level, okay, worth killing babies for or anything else. Wasted suffering.
The more I study the matter, the less it seems to be morally important.
Ooh, hate that word. They're all ethical questions. Morality is dogma. It's not a conversation about good dogma. It's a conversation about how you should rationally understand your participation here on Earth and what you're involved in, which is a multiplayer game. Okay, so you guys, you've heard the spiel. But yes, I mean, it's just they're just pretending that this morality thing is something other than a description of our reality. And that's all it is. That's all it should be. That's all you should be doing, is just describing the fact that we have this conundrum, okay, of having positives and negatives, and we have to figure out whether we're making a good purchase. Very expensive. Not your money.
Good or bad things more generally.
Right. So, well, I mean, as a neuroscientist, I do think morality is a product of the brain, and I do think morality.
So yeah, it's just silly. Everything is a product of the brain. So again, everything we could possibly say is interesting or whatever is a product of the brain. So, it's just nonsense. And then all the products of the brain are all these calculations, all of this just processing of the environment and figuring out what parts are important, and that's it. And all of that, frankly, is none of it is of any value from any innate source where, oh, my instinct says snake's bad, smash, smash. Well, we know that's not rational. We know that ugly doesn't make something bad or evil or nasty. And again, this is the only way we function, is that we have to make something cute to protect it. And if it's ugly, then it's, oh, well, then we'll eat it for dinner. I mean, it's just such bullshit. Fucking... It is not the fact. There's animals on Earth. The animals would have been here if we weren't. So let's say humans never happened because a tree fell on the first one with the extra chromosome, and the end. It didn't happen. So you have no sophisticated thinking organisms on Earth. It doesn't mean there's not being value isn't being exchanged. Yes, that aliens couldn't show up and talk about how all the kinds of conscious experiences are happening on Earth, and they could have all the same conversations and just say, well, they're not very smart. That would be the conclusion. Their capacity to do the math is limited because they have a limited understanding of what they're caught in. They can't climb up the wall of the maze and see it the way we can. And that's the only difference. That's the only difference, is that we can get a better perspective using knowledge. Damn. And there's no moral guidepost beyond recognizing that the experience of sentient organisms is the nature of all the value. That without a sentient organism being capable of having a good or bad experience, you can't make value in. So we have no moral guidepost. We have no moral judgment at birth. And our entire judgment is dependent on this information we acquire about what we're doing here. If I'm supposed to be just making myself happy, well, then obviously I'm missing a whole moral component. Obviously I'm missing the multiplayer game fact. And that's how a lot of people live their life. I mean, it could have happened to me. maybe if I didn't become a little bit insecure and introverted, then I wouldn't have asked all these questions to myself about my own functionality, and I would have been a user and an abuser and an exploiter and all of that crap, and done so quite comfortably, because I never acquired any capacity to judge the function of my life in any context besides how do I feel about it. And obviously that didn't happen. And probably most importantly, it didn't happen because it occurred to me, not because I tried to do it, but it just happened that my brain wandered at night, and it always wandered in pretty horrific ways of trying to imagine all the crap that's going on in the world. And I suppose I was doing some of that selfishly. How do I avoid all of the crap that happens to people? And to think about how I avoid it, I was thinking about it happening to them. And, you didn't have to do much of that to become pretty terrified. Yeah.
Communities or social communities that develop these ways of thinking. So I'm not sure I would advocate we should be moral because it's useful to us.
So this is just so disgusting that they would have some conversation. There's right and wrong, and that's what morality is about. It's not about usefulness. It's just this is just a disgusting way to talk about value. In terms of utility to who? America? What? A utility to what? Humans? Oh, a utility to who? Our family name. All of this crap is not understanding the value landscape. To use to whatever you call that, mix a metaphor a little bit. Very sensible word in everything they read, and only read the nonsensical garbage somehow. Oh, fuck. This is... See, this is part of the little bits of suffering. It's the stuff you have to endure that just makes your brain sort of vomits. Yeah. It just is, so this is the subtlety of pain. Is that pain isn't just ouch, it's all this other ooh and eh and it's got lots of other components to it. Third grade or something? I don't know.
When we say we're conscious, it's because a bundle of information describes us that way.
Okay, so a bundle of information describes us that way. No, the reality earns the description. We see that, yes, the organisms that are feeling and, brain activity pumping and modifying their behavior and doing all of this stuff, they deserve this label of being conscious. They have a brain. They are manifesting this internal drama that creates their external action. Their external action isn't just a reflex. It goes through this process of interpretation through this feeling thing. It has to go through this feeling fog, and you appreciate that difference. So there's crude organisms, parameciums or something, they're just going directly from, action to reaction. We're going through it and then go through this reward and punishment memory system, interpretator, distorter, perverter glass, some little crystal of fucked up feelings, and then get to reaction. So it's just a different process, and it deserves a different label. It's it's a significant difference being capable of experiencing pain. So it can program itself instead of that's why there's reward and punishment is yes. So we're not pre-programmed organisms. We can completely modify our behavior so we can adapt to being a blacksmith or being a maid or being a star polisher or whatever. We can do all kinds of different things and be all kinds of different things and live in all kinds of different environments because we're adaptable, because we don't have standard mechanical reflexes. We have completely modifiable reflexes dependent on the addition of our life experience. Our life experience decides what you feel. Fact. And those feelings decide whether you have an incentive to go forward or to run away. So our entire flight and fight response is being modified by our life experience. Alright, so that's probably enough. One more. And they become afraid of humans or not afraid of humans. Alright, so I was just talking about cats, and if you play with them when they're kittens, human beings, then the cats will grow up to be perfectly comfortable with humans and everything will be fine. No humans while they're kittens, then you got a big problem ever retraining them to trust a human being. So anyway, enough said, I believe, and I think it's all worth doing. I'm just saying, so if you're going to watch the videos, it is a lot of videos, but whatever, you watch it, don't watch it. It's not my... Your brain has to make that calculation whether there's enough value, and the odds are you already have a bunch of facts that are consistent with mine, and you've added them up and come up with pretty close to the same numbers and conclusions. So you probably don't need to, but that's the whole problem, right? The audience doesn't need to hear the videos. The audience I have, and it's hard to get that other audience that needs to hear the arguments. They need to be forced to interact with the counter arguments to their delusional optimism. But you can't even lead the morons to the water. I mean, you're not given any tools for that. Probably won't drink it anyway, but you can't even drag them there. So it's a difficult task, as I have complained lately. This is really a very tough job I have. I don't like it much. It's not much fun. But whatever. Brain says it must be done. The fact is, there could be a war, and you're the only person that shows up because everybody else says I got something better to do, and you're just stuck sitting there looking at 500,000 guns pointed at you, and you're just saying, well, somebody's got to do it, so okay, I'll do it because nobody else shows up. It's not my bad. I did my job, and you'll just do your job and be run over, and that's the end. But anyway, can't. There's no option. You either fight and win or you lose. So that's it. There's nothing else. You automatically lose by running away, is the argument. So at least you have some chance if you're fighting. But you have no chance if you won't fight. You'll just lose. Yeah, that's all. It's simple enough, right? There's whatever you want to think. There's a giant eagle coming to, feed you to its young, and the running. It's going to run. It'll catch you. So running away won't work. So you might as well pick up a stick and say, maybe I can hit it on one of its knuckles, and run away. Maybe. Maybe I can get lucky somehow. The odds are against it, but you got to do it because that's all you've got. So I'll do it because it's all there is, as far as I can tell. I can't just hand it off to all the other professionals, accomplishing the task, because there aren't any. All right, no mercenaries. There's nobody. Okay. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. More convoluted analysis of the circumstance than is needed, but whatever. So, Yeah, that's enough of a video.